Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the African Experience podcast. This is episode number 8. A brand new year, a brand new episode, and new things to come on this podcast. Before you actually go, I just wanted to have some quick word, or one or two, if you allow me. So, it's New Year. We all have plans. We all have big goals we want to achieve. But the mistake most of us do is we try to take it too fast, too quick, and there's actually a research or survey about New Year's resolution, and that most people by the 19th or 20th January, they've already given up on their New Year's resolutions and plans. And I hope that doesn't actually happen to you. And my advice, this is just my humble advice. Slow. Take it slow. Make sure you improve, however small, 1%, 2%, every single day. And when you calculate it at the end of the year, you realize you actually increased, or you've actually improved way more than you actually expected. So basically what I'm trying to say is slow and steady wins the race. I mean, we've all read that book. Slow and steady wins the race. So let's take it slow. Make sure we make short-term plans, medium-term and long-term plans. Make sure they're all correlated, and this is actually how I think we can succeed. All right, having said that, an important thing you might realize when you get into this podcast, for those of us, for our returning podcast listeners, you might actually realize something different. Yes, my colleague Yakub Ali wasn't able to make this podcast for personal reasons, but it's not an issue. He's going to be back, so yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to actually say. So I've already taken too much time. Enjoy the podcast. Leave us a like and subscribe wherever you find this podcast, on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. Just leave us a 5-star rating, and whatever you want to say, comment, whatever, share. All right. Again, too much time. See you on the other side.
There is a new African in the world. The black man is capable of managing his own affairs.
Welcome to the African Experience Podcast, your podcast for fascinating discussions, stories, and interviews from the diaspora. Your host, two ordinary Africans.
Hello, fellas. Welcome to another episode of the African Experience Podcast, our first episode of 2021. And we have a different type of episode for you. We have a new guest, our first ever African Experience Podcast guest. And we actually hope our guest would be a recurring guest. Our guest will be coming in once a while, talk about some expertise, some matters regarding Africa. And today will be his first day on our podcast. So without further ado, I'd like to bring in our guest today, Usman Aliyu UBA, a producer on TRT WORLD. Hello, Usman. How have you been?
Hello, Hafiz. I'm delightful to be one of, if not the first, guests, or I will even say guest of honor, because it's really, I'm really, really humbled to be on this platform to share my ideas with you and our audience or audience who will be listening to this podcast. Um, Indeed, it's a privilege for me, and the invitation you extended to me makes me even more happier. So I said the keyword here, happy. I'm very happy, and I'm doing well.
Very good.
Very happy to be on this platform.
Very
Yeah.
good. So, we've had an eventful year with 2020 probably would go into the history of the world as one of the turning points, either for good or bad. We can never really know in the history of the world, basically. So, one thing, I actually have two questions for you. What would you say is a habit you acquired from 2020 that you would want it to be permanent no matter what? That's my first question. Then I'll ask you the second one after.
So the two main habits I'm looking forward to continue with, or which I've learned in the year 2020. Of course, it's a year like no other, right? It's unprecedented in the history of mankind, that we will experience a very, very deadly pandemic, which will, that's have took lots of lots of lives, and even with many infections still ongoing across the world. So one of the main character or habit which I'm looking forward to continue with is tempo. What I mean by tempo is the speed
Okay.
in trying to achieve my goals, or in trying to reach a target which I've planned for myself.
Very good.
We were all in isolation in the year 2020, beginning from the time when the pandemic um, began to ravage, several countries across the world, when lockdowns were imposed in many countries, including here in Turkey.
That's
We all went into isolation, working remotely from home. And I, as a journalist, there is this issue of, you know, um, achieving a task which you are assigned to do. As a producer, you are entitled to thoroughly understand a story and deliver the contents of the story, including the script and the best pictures you have before, hand to tell the story. So you are allocated very few time, like less than an hour. You are being expected to write a script, to edit the script, and to tell the story. So you have to be very cautious about the time you've been allocated with to work. So if you are not those kinds of people who um, work under pressure, I have to put it this way: we as journalists, we work under pressure. You are always under pressure, and prep is very important here. Preparation, you are all the time. You are expected to be prepared
you have
for.
to deliver.
You have to deliver, and you are expected to be prepared for any um, unknown circumstance, for any unknown developments across the world. So there could be a breaking news, and when you're not prepared, so it's going to be something that you will really be terrified with. So preparation and tempo. Tempo in the sense that when there are no colleagues, when you are not in the newsroom, you are on your own. You are on your own alone. So you cannot shout on colleagues to help you.
Okay.
So you are on your own and you have to deliver it,
Very,
irrespective of working in isolation. You know what I mean? So the
absolutely.
tempo I acquired, the tempo I used to be in 2020, I will definitely want to continue with that tempo when I am assigned a task or when I have a plan to achieve a goal. I should be very, very cautious about the timing and deliver it on time. So tempo is very important.
Very good.
Another habit is to also try to be happy. I mean, irrespective of the circumstance you find yourself. Of course, we are all humans. Um, there are some times that we will be happy, and there are some times that we are going to be unhappy,
Definitely.
especially during the pandemic. A lot of us are under stress, depression, and what have you. But it's trying to keep yourself motivating yourself that, look, there are other things to look at. It's not all gloom and doom. You know what I mean? So there are other circumstances, there are other things that you have to look at that will make you at least give you a glimpse of hope. You know what I mean? So,
Definitely.
so if you look not just to, embed yourself with this COVID issue, but also try to look at other issues that will make you happy. So to make you happy is to have the hope that things will get better and try to make other as well be happy and not trying to show that, okay, this is a very worst circumstances that we are all in. And then the way you also try to showcase that in your character, in your face, also doesn't translate well to other people. So try to be happy, look at other brighter side of life, and then that will also make others happy as well.
Oh, okay. That's actually there are two very good points. I mean, I couldn't agree more. So tempo, preparation, right? Tempo and preparation and being happy no matter what the circumstances. That's good, really. I mean, especially the second one. There've been a lot of mental health issues, and it's all related to what has come upon us recently, the pandemic we've talked about, and I think a lot of people, and us included, we've talked about it extensively, and we want to actually look forward to what life has for us within the coming years. And that leads me to the second one is what is your one goal? I mean, people have loads of goals to achieve. And, whenever a new year is starting, we have this New Year's resolution and then we never actually fulfill them. What is one goal of yours you want to achieve or fulfill no matter what happens?
We all have desires in life. We all have goals. In fact, unlimited goals, because the more you achieve one, the more you have another target. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Have several goals to achieve this year, hopefully. And I'm very, very determined to achieve those goals, which I think it's going to be something that will touch my life positively, in
that's
a
good.
sense. Um, it's one of my goal to embark on a new adventure. I mean, I as a person, I really don't like to be in a same location, same place, doing same thing. I'm very, very ambitious in terms of trying other things,
Okay.
right? Trying other, it could be something of a different nature from what I'm doing previously,
I see.
because trying other things makes me more happier, makes me more flexible. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
To, to, to be in a state of making myself happy, because the more I achieve, the more I, live from one thing to the other, I
Mm-hmm.
think that will make me much more happier. So yes, there are several things. It's not just one thing.
Very good. Very
It
good.
could
Yeah,
be
that's
trying to embark on a new adventure. It could be a same job, but then different location, different place.
interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
these are some of my plans,
Okay.
and hopefully,
I think that's a really positive outlook on life in general. Stagnation, when you live in a place or when you work at a place and it's monotonic, you do the same thing every
uh,
time, every day. I mean, I feel like it's the state of a person to change, right?
absolutely.
Sometimes it might be scary, sometimes it might be difficult, it might even feel borderline impossible,
Mm, mm,
but the journey is what counts, in my opinion. So I do like that goal. The change, the flexibility is what we
mm,
should we
mm,
should yearn for, in my opinion.
absolutely.
Okay, so that's really a good intro, and I think people already know who you are by now from this intro. Okay, so Usman, I've known you for long. I mean, we've been high school mates, we've been friends for long, and to be honest, I wouldn't say I saw you as a journalist or I saw you as someone who would embark on such career, right? You'd probably agree, but you never know what people are thinking. So, for people who do not know you, right, can you briefly let us know why you became a journalist? What's the journey? A brief journey.
Well, honestly, from the beginning, or even from my childhood, I didn't have any future ambition to become a journalist, and I've never thought of becoming a journalist in future. All what we've done, or what we were dreaming of, is to see what's is around us, and how people are trying to like shape the way our paths, shape the way which they want you to be in future, right?
That's true. That's
It's
true.
not like you are being forced to, but there are these customs and traditions, especially in Africa, where your parents will be watching you very closely. Your
Yeah.
guardians will be watching you very closely, advising you on what they want you to be in future. However, yes, I went to a science college, science schools with my age mates, with my siblings or relatives as well. So we try to motivate each other, especially in the field of science. But then the point of which I realized that okay, I should try something different is when I left secondary school.
Okay.
I thought of embarking on something different from what the rest of my family members or relatives are doing, because almost all my relatives members, which we've attended school with, or those who we grew up together, they were science oriented kind of thinking, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my decision at that time when I left secondary school is to try something different, perhaps on social science. on humanity as well. So I from there I tried when I left secondary school, then high school, I came to do more studies on theology, if you will.
Yeah.
So theology is a field of studying religions,
Yeah.
and from there I went to my degree program, which I studied sociology. And it's before I finished sociology, so I realized that journalism could be a good field for me because it allows you to explore different society, to explore what's going on in a society, especially by reaching out to the respondents, to the people affected by the story you are trying to explore.
That's
Of
true.
course, you could be a sociology, but the more you are on the field, just like a journalist, that will allow you, that will give you the access to the people you want to study or you want to understand. And it's from there, after, even before I finished my sociology, I tried to contact several media outlets, as in writing feature stories, telling stories about my country, which I came from, Nigeria. So trying to understand some cultures, some traditions, and then writing feature stories on some media outlets, working as a freelancer sort of a
That's
thing.
that's
And
interesting.
then from there, I got the opportunity to join another international media outlet, which is TRT World, which I'm currently more than half a decade now working with TRT World. As a producer, I have been on the field. I have worked both in-house and as a producer on the field, as I said. So I think if you want to understand people, you have to reach out to the people, you have to work with the people on the ground, especially you have to be on ground on the field. And by asking the kind of questions you're trying to explore. And I think, yeah, it's really, really interesting field. However, there are obstacles, there are challenges and risks with journalism. But
Okay.
despite the challenges, I think it's one of the most interesting sort of a job or occupation or something that it will link you, it will give you that connection, access to the people you're trying to understand.
Very good. I mean, as Africans, we need our stories to be told by Africans. And if our stories are always being told by other people other than us, it's not going to be as accurate, or even it's going to be by their own interest. So I am really, really glad that you are at this position and you can actually relay what the truth is of what the continent is suffering onto the world. And I think this is a really good segue for us to actually enter into the main topic today, right? So, talking about journalism and relaying African stories to the rest of the world, or the accurate African story to the rest of the world, there's always this thing that really bothers me, and it always comes up: the political instability that faces, or that the African countries face. Would you say um, it has increased over the years, or there is a progress towards a more calmer political stability in on the continent? What would you say about that?
I will have to say it's an aberration. It was an aberration considering the agenda um, hallucinated, if I will use the word hallucinated,
Okay.
the agenda which the African Union envisioned to achieve in the year 2020. So the African Union set the goal that 2020 was meant to be with a thematic um, phrase here there, which was to silence the guns.
Okay.
Silencing the gun, which means conflict across the continent should be calm, if not at all, if not even totally stopped, but at least there should be progress in peacemaking, in negotiations, in calming this or silencing the guns, the fightings in many corners of the continent. The reason I said aberration because there was this plan, there was this dream to achieve the goal of stopping the fightings, at least making progress in terms of negotiations and agreements across parties, factions fighting on the different countries across the continent. But then the nightmare was when COVID struck. COVID came, everything changed all of a sudden. Nobody has planned for that. It's caught people, COVID caught countries unguarded. You couldn't plan, you couldn't foresee what was coming.
Okay.
And especially for fragile states, particularly in Africa, it was a very, very indeed terrible moment, which leaders couldn't even know what they could do. I mean, not only African states,
That's true.
across the world, many states, including European countries, they were caught unguarded. They couldn't know what they will do. In fact, even as I'm speaking now, a lot of countries in Europe are still experiencing the consequences, the ramifications of COVID-19. So indeed, the year 2020, which was like no other. I mean, African states, there were we were expecting that okay, conflict resolutions or peacemakings will be in progress, but unfortunately, it was a new page in terms of conflicts, conflict across the continent, because it was in 2020 we see political stability in Mali with the military coup, because the president Boubacar Keita was accused of mismanagement, of rampant corruption in the government, and then the lack of insecurity as well. I mean, the issue of insecurity, lack of security of the government to handle the security issue in the country. So people were even hoping for the government to go.
Okay.
So the military stepped in, and then there was this coup, and we saw it was bloodless, but then no country will ever hope, even a coup which is bloodless, to see that when other countries are on the path of democracy or on the path of you know the issue of human rights, the rights and responsibility, the rights for the citizens to express themselves, to select their leader
Okay.
based on democracy, and then nobody will hope to see a military coup in this era. And so the military stepped in. Unfortunately, the president was taken out of office. He was deposed from power, and then in other countries, this is Mali. In other parts of the continent, other countries like Ethiopia, the Tigray crisis,
Yes.
the Tigray conflict is um, another page which nobody will anticipate that the prime minister himself, who was a Nobel Peace winner, if you will, Abiy Ahmed, he received this Nobel Prize on
Oh,
Peace because he made a peace between Eritrea and his country Ethiopia. You
yeah.
know, these enemies before he came to power. Eritrea, even when it splitted from Ethiopia, the 19s, during the conflict, which splitted the country from Ethiopia, and then before he even came to power, they were enemies. Bilateral agreements, there were not movements, free movements between the countries. But then when he came, he struck an agreement with the Eritrean government, and then before you know, it was everywhere. Everybody was chanting, championing. He became a champion. Indeed, he received the Nobel Peace
Peace
Award
Prize, of course.
for what he done. It's really really big task to achieve. But then in 2020, what we saw in Tigray crisis in northern part of the country is another conflict, which the rebels in the region were accused of targeting or attacking the central government military posts, and then the government decided to deploy its own forces to the region to bring those perpetrators to justice. Those perpetrators who are the Tigray leaders, the Tigrayans. The Tigrayans, of course, they wanted to split away from the central government, the federal government. And
Interesting.
then, despite warning from the federal government that there is a central government, there is a federal government, you have to abide by the rules of the constitutions of the federal government. But then the Tigrayans, they turned a blind eyes on what the federal government was saying. So the federal government takes things into its own hand, trying to restore peace, restore order, laws and orders in the region. So that's when we've seen this conflict. And if you ask many experts, security experts from the region will tell you this is going to be, despite now there's calm in the region, but then we've seen nearly 1 million people being displaced from the region.
Unfortunately.
Several hundreds of thousands fled to the neighboring Sudan. Sudan is already experiencing its own challenges, but
Exactly.
despite that, Sudan opened its borders to the Tigrayan refugees. Many were killed, even though the death toll hasn't been released because of the communication blackout in the region. It's very, very difficult for journalists, for even human rights groups, or even humanitarian groups to get access to the region. So you don't even know what's really happening in the region.
Interesting.
So it's gonna be what people or experts are scared and warning is that it's going to be a protracted conflict, which no one knows when it's going to end, despite the government says it has retaken control of the region. But it's a conflict that nobody anticipated, and it's presumably going to be a protracted one, which will continue for the years or for months, if not years to come. So it's really, really a difficult year. These are the main two examples. I mean, there are other examples so, that we could see insurgency in even West Africa, including country like Nigeria. Insurgency was also at its peak. Boko Haram still continue to carry out
Very unfortunate.
attacks,
Very unfortunate.
even across the borders. Even in southern African countries, we've also seen the rise of other militant groups. So, unfortunately, as the African Union envisioned that it's wanted kind of silencing the guns for insurgency or political instability to calm, if not at least
To diminish.
totally stopped. But yeah, it was very very difficult to achieve that agenda.
Thanks, man. With all these, would you say, compared to maybe 50 years ago, there is an increase in such events, or there's a more relatively lower? How would you describe it?
So you see, when we compared half a century ago from the current situation we are, or we are experiencing
Mhm.
across Africa, is then that was 50 years ago. There was this issue of struggling for independence. Many countries were delinking, if you like, delinking from the colonial powers.
Yeah.
There was this ambition, this hope to struggle for independence, and you've seen collaboration, cooperation among many African states, because the main goal then was to delink themselves from colonial powers, and they achieved this. Some achieve it, most of the states achieve it, of course, through bloodless struggle, which they
Diplomacy,
now,
right?
exactly, through diplomacy, if you like, through agreements signed with the colonial powers. They struggled for the independence. So it was a struggle against the colonial powers, against the colonial enemies, uh, which exploited the continent for centuries. So then, after the struggle for independence, of course, there was some pockets of political instability, because that's how, when we began to see the emergence of military coup in some countries, because some factions in some of the countries were not happy with the kind of rules or the kind of leadership in some of the countries. Like an example is in Nigeria. Nigeria got its independence in 1960, and then it was unfortunate to see a military coup in 1966, sort of a thing. And that's how it continues through the First Republic, Second Republic, until the Third Republic. There was this ruptures, there was this, ups and downs, struggle of both democracy and then military coups. So I could say from the early like 50s, 60s, there was this relative peace and calm across the continent.
Okay.
But then as it goes into 70s, 80s, of course, there's another different kind of political instability, which was mainly about the leadership. And then from 2000 until recently, from the millennium until recently, it's another pace of instability, because when I said from 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s until 2000, it was more about struggle on the leadership, which is military coup versus democracy. Now the political instability is much beyond that, in the sense that it's now we've seen the rise of militant groups in many parts of the continent. Some of these are extremist factions, which they take religion as a pretext to indoctrinate the society, to tell them that this is not the best way of life for you people, and then indoctrinating both through their teachings and then through militancy using force, especially against the state. So it's kind of, there was a conflict, but it was relatively calm and peace then. Unfortunately, now the conflict has been, the issue of security has deteriorated in many fronts, both in terms of politics and in terms of social aspects of people in many societies across Africa.
Very interesting. Actually, before the end of 2020, I actually had this idea to make a timeline. And you can actually find the timeline on our Instagram page.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was researching, it was very sad and just sickening, to be honest, to the fact that it was very hard to actually see something positive on the continent. Although there definitely has been a lot of positives on the continent, but in general, it was very difficult to find something positive. So we made a timeline, and if you go through the timeline, you can see different conflicts. You made mention of the Tigray. It's on the timeline. In Congo, in Mozambique, every single part of the continent. Rather than us finding ways to move forward, it seems like we're always finding ways to pull ourselves back, so to speak. Um, Having said that, I recently read this article actually. Let me see. I had some note on the articles. It was from this dean of University of West Georgia on the political instability of Africa, and he made mention of some theories. And I would be interested. I'd like to know what you think about this. So he gave, I think, three theories, but one was something that actually caught my attention. So he talked about the Cold War theory, and I was really surprised how he could relate the Cold War to the political instability in Africa. But that wasn't the main issue. Here, he also mentioned the ethnic theory, and this is where I feel like it's the majority of the political instability of Africa. And within that ethnic theory, he said the ethnic theory is separated into three main parts, right? He talked about say, what did he say? Interethnic rivalries. He made mention of the fact that the government aligns themselves with quote unquote the most powerful ethnic groups, and then stuff like this. Do you think is the main cause of political instability, or it's just a propaganda to make Africa look tribal? You get my question. Do you think that is the main problem?
Um, I'm not going to reject that thesis or the argument that ethnicity plays a lot of roles in terms of instability in Africa. Um, uh, I will also agree with uh, that point, the point that um, many societies are divided across ethnic lines in Africa, and then this ethnicity plays a lot of roles in terms of the leadership, in terms of the government structure, in terms of how the people live in those countries. Indeed, when you look at the issue, as I mentioned, in terms of conflicts with within Ethiopia, so Tigray is a particular group which is in the northern part of the country. That is their traditions, their customs, and what have you are entirely different from one part of the country, which is another example is the Oromo people. It's a different tribe. So when you have the prime minister who is from different tribe, ethnic tribe, who is from the Oromo region or the Oromian people, who are different from Tigrayans, what they will look is, okay, the Tigrayans want to kind of impose their will, or they want to show themselves as the strong or as the powerful ethnic in Ethiopia. So it's hardly for one group like the Oromia to accept what the Tigrayans are doing in a sense.
Yeah.
So when you have a prime minister from a different ethnic group, it's hardly for such a person, for such a leader to strike a deal or um, to kind of approach the situation with a peace, peaceful kind of solution to quell the violence or to quell the crisis without using force, without using military to tackle the issue. So I agree with the fact that ethnicity plays a lot of role, even in terms of the way African people choose their own leaders. It's likely for someone, for a voter in any country across Africa to vote across ethnic lines. If you have two candidates, one is from tribe A and then you have another candidate from tribe B.
Yeah.
So for a voter who is from tribe A, it's highly unlikely to see such a voter voting for somebody different from his or her own tribe. So in terms of leadership, absolutely, tribe, the issue of ethnicity plays a lot of role in terms of how African people choose their own leaders. And of course, in the issue of even the issue of political instability in terms of the conflicts in many of the countries, we are seeing or experiencing the fighting among different ethnic groups. It's hardly for a fight to see fighting within a particular same, unique tribe. So it's more about different factions. It's more about different ethnic groups fighting for power. Of course, the goal here is power, the power to take control of what you are aiming to take control of, which is presumably to be the one who will be saying what you want to others. So the issue of power is what we've been experiencing about different ethnic groups fighting among and struggling to take the power on their own.
It's really interesting and it's sad at the same time because, in my opinion, right, I do believe there's no way we can do without being tribal or ethnic, right? I mean, even human beings throughout history are always one way or the other, ethnical or tribal. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it the left, you can call it the right, you can call it Republican, Democrat. It's all kind of tribal, right? But it's very sad that if it's in the African context, it almost always leads to conflicts or war that could destabilize the country. We can give Rwanda, Liberia as a sole examples of how tribal or ethnical wars can actually deteriorate the country's progress and the country itself. So here, do we see any change in terms of ethnic conflict or political instability or stability, so to speak, within the coming years? Do you see any silver lining, if I can put it that way?
I would like to also mention this to our audience that ethnic conflict or conflict among different ethnic groups is not only happening in Africa.
Yes, yes, that's
It's
certain.
happening in other parts of the world, as you also mentioned that there are people are. It depends on which group you are aligning yourself to.
Yes.
So that's how you see people pushing their own agenda against others. Balkan, which is a region in
Middle of
Europe,
Europe, right? Yeah.
Europe, right? There's this issue of the Balkans countries, before it was former Yugoslavia,
Yeah.
and then they got splitted with different, because of ethnicity, because of the different groups, tribes you have in Yugoslavia, in the
That's
former
true.
Yugoslavia. And then when there was this war, different
Militant.
countries splitted out of Yugoslavia. You have Montenegro, you have Kosovo, you have Bosnia Herzegovina, you have Serbia, and what have you.
Yeah.
So, an ethnicity or ethnic conflicts, the conflicts among different ethnic groups, of course, plays role in the balkanization of these countries. Um, in terms of Africa, of course, it's more severe in the sense that you have hundreds of tribes living together. It's a progress. I mean, they are. It's not all gloom and doom.
That's
We have to mention that all the time Africa is in insecurity. No, it's Africa. There are um, peaceful situations which you've seen, or the dialogue. We have to mention the issue of dialogue and tolerance among different ethnic groups in Africa. I myself, I came from a country where more than 300 ethnic groups, are living together, and then you have about 500 languages spoken in the country, and people will always imagine how on earth are you people living together despite these different,
differences.
differences, the tribes, the cultures, languages. How are you living together? So we have to mention that there's tolerance. There's tolerance which you see intermarriages across the tribes.
Hmm.
There's also dialogue, people learning each other's language and each other's tradition,
That's true.
living in harmony, in peace and harmony. But the main one of the I don't like using the word conspiracy here. One of the thoughts people are always claiming is the colonial project, when the colonial powers were about to hand over power to the locals.
Hmm.
There was this project in that was um, designed for the locals to ungovern themselves by themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a conspiracy, or it's an argument. I won't use the word conspiracy. It's an argument which scholars have argued that the colonial powers, when they were about to hand over power, they designed their own agenda, which will make the locals ungovern themselves by themselves, because there was the issue of ethnicity. But then ethnicity, despite the fact that we agree it plays a role in terms of political instability, but at some point we will see dialogues, tolerance, harmony,
Definitely.
people living together with each other. So there could be some powers behind the scenes playing, trying to push their own agenda through ethnicity, making one group to fight against another group just for somebody which we are not aware of, or the people there are not aware that somebody is trying to achieve, or they wanted to achieve their own goals
That's
through using the issue of ethnicity or even religion. If we can also add that to the conflict, because it's not mainly about ethnicity, it's also about religion, because some people who are extremists, who are fanatics in terms of using religion, they try to use religion as a pretext to fight against others. So there's also the issue of religion, not only ethnicity, which plays a role in terms of political instability in many African states.
Oh, very good. I mean, obviously, the ethnic conflict is definitely not the only um, the only cause of African political or societal instability. There are lots of there are many reasons. There are many points we can actually point out, but we work with time. Unfortunately, we cannot really get into every single theory, especially even looking around what we see recently. There certainly is improvement. There certainly is an understanding among the countries across Africa, among the ethnic groups, among the people around. What we need to actually mention here is we are talking about this because it's one of the main causes. People have written books about uh, colonial powers, as you say. Even though we seem independent, there's a certain, like you said, me either. I don't like to call it. Maybe we might have a better word for it, but we don't for now. There's probably a conspiracy and talk of other puppet masters who are actually the benefactors of all the instability that happens in Africa. But that's another story for another day. Um, Entering into 2021, there is a good news. I'd always say it's a good news on the continent. There is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I don't know if you've actually looked into it, or you definitely have looked into it. You're a journalist. What do you say it holds? What would you say it holds for the continent in the near and coming future?
Yes, it's really an ambitious project, which was meant to even kick off in the year
2020 July.
2020, 2020 actually, before COVID struck, and then it was postponed. The agreement was signed even before 2020, but then it was meant to kick off, to start, that's the free trade to begin to start it in 2020, but because of the issues of the pandemic, it was postponed until this year, January. Um, it's an ambitious project, one of the largest, if you like, trade area after the World Trade Organization.
That is
So
true.
one of the largest among 53 African states. We are expected to see free movements of goods and services, and to be to be optimistic about the free trade agreement. It's really a plan, a project that will also foster, if you like, peace and harmony among different countries on the continent. Of course, there was an issue of security challenges, countries opening their border. You don't know who will come in, who will go out, sort
Yeah,
of speculations. Um, Many countries are like kind of afraid of those kinds of situations when we open our borders. So there could be, when there is a porous border, you don't know what kind of elements will come into your territory,
that's true.
and it could be a kind of disaster for a country to kind of tackle that. And there was this challenge of security, but I think having a continental free trade zone or trade area, it's really an ambitious project that will foster peace among different states. When when countries in the 90s, countries like Ethiopia, Eritrea, when there is no movement of free goods and services, you see when there is no free movement of people, Of course, you will call those countries enemies of each other. But then when you got an agreement which will allow when the states among themselves agree that, okay, our people will be moving freely to one's territory,
Mhm.
of course, the flow of people, flow of goods and services will economically and politically as well as socially improve um, the the targets, the goals for the continent to be at peace with itself. You know what I mean? So continental free trade agreement is indeed one of the ambitious projects which will foster peace and harmony. It's also going to foster um, um, the economic status of the continent, for it to be dependent on itself, irrespective of depending on um,
The
the
outside.
outside world,
Mhm.
uh, like the incumbent president of Ghana. I like his idea of the 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 Africa which will be independent of the aid. What he's trying to put here is that an Africa free from aid, because
Yes.
when you said Africa, people what they understand is a continent which is stagnant, which has lacked development in terms of economic, in terms of political, in terms of social developments. So Africa all the time is reaching out to outside world for help, for aid. So the Ghanaian president Nana Akufo-Addo, his ambition is an Africa, or particularly his country Ghana free to kind of be independent from the outside world, to be
Def-
able to encounter its own problem, to be able to encounter its own challenge through its own solution and through its own hard work. So I think AFCTA, which is also its headquarters is in Ghana,
Oh,
I think kind of translates the
interesting.
idea which that Africa itself will be linked, or it's on the path of trying to provide its own needs, be it economic, be it political, or be it even in terms of providing the the financial capability to tackle its own problem through trade and free movement of people across the continent. I think AFCTF is an ambitious project. Of course, there are challenges. One of the challenges is the security challenge, because many countries are yet to believe that the security issue across borders will be a potential obstacle. Um, but we are optimistic that with time, as security issue gets improved across many states, the border insecurity becomes lessened. So we hope that FCTA, the free trade agreement, will be a very fruitful agreement for all the African countries.
Definitely. I mean, a self-sustaining Africa is what we all hope for. It's something, I mean, we hope to actually live and actually see happen. And hopefully, this is, like, as you call it, an ambitious, but hopefully a step that would be realized. So, unfortunately, time is always the issue, right? So, one thing I would like to ask is if there is a young, a vibrant high schooler, university graduate, anyone who has the ambition of becoming a journalist, even becoming a journalist on an international outlet like TRT World, what is one thing, just one thing that the person can hold to actually achieve such lofty goals?
I think it's about passion.
Passion.
It's about passion, irrespective of the risks, the challenges, the obstacles. You should you should have the passion to reach out to people. And reaching out to people here, it means, of course, there are risks in reaching out to people, in telling the truth, in telling people the real stories of one part of the world.
Yeah.
So you must have the passion. It shouldn't be anything beyond passion, because if you have the passion, you will be in any place. You could find yourself in any circumstance which you've never experienced. Passion will kind of lead you to where you want to reach. And so my main actually habits when I'm doing journalism is the passion to read. First, you have to read, because journalism is not a lazy job. You always have to be across things. You have to be up to date. So having the passion to read different stories of different people around the world, be it from Africa, from Asia, from Europe. You have to read, 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 read.
Yeah.
Because reading, having, seeking for the knowledge, the passion to seek for the knowledge will enlighten you about different culture, about a country, about a group. If you don't read, it's hardly for you to understand the country you're trying to understand, or people you're trying to explore. So the passion to read and the passion to also embark on the journey when the time comes, because there will be a time when you may have the opportunity to travel. So traveling to see first-hand experiences, to have first-hand experiences in terms of talking to the people you're trying to understand, in terms of exploring their ways of lives, or be at the settlement where something is happening. So if you have the passion to be there, to be on the field, that will allow you to understand what's going on in that particular place. So having the passion, if you don't have passion, you cannot do anything in journalism. The passion to deliver, the passion to be on the field, the passion to talk to people. Because not everyone talk to people, especially those who you don't know.
That's true.
It's a huge task, and even sometimes a risk to
Yes.
talk to people on the streets, or the people in a very, very remote location which you've never been to before. So passion is the key word here. Passion to do
Definitely.
journalism.
Definitely. I mean, you couldn't have said it even more. Passion. So,
Exactly.
I mean, that's great advice.
Mhm.
Almost in every aspect of life, without the passion, it would just be as if you're just a robot, right? Passion is what we said. You've heard it. So anyone who wishes to become a journalist or to follow a very similar path, you heard it here. It's passion. And for people who do not know you, Mr. Osman, for people who want to know your works, is there any way they can actually reach out to you? It could be social media, whatever platform you have.
Yeah. So I'm not very much active on social media, but I have my social media accounts, including Twitter accounts
Okay.
and Instagram. But I mainly use Twitter to tell the stories of my own interests, and particularly in the field of journalism. So my Twitter account, which is at Usman Aliyu UBA, is my account, which I post content, be it from what we produce as TRT World, or be it from other international or local media outlets, or even some experts who are specialized on a particular field. Yes, so Twitter accounts. I have a Twitter account
All right.
which people can follow me on.
All right, that's very good. It's been a pleasure, man. We could have talked about issues and other things, but this is what time is permitting us to. And thanks for your time, Usman. Thank you for coming on.
I'm also grateful. It's been a pleasure to be on your platform to talk to you, to share my experiences, ideas. I hope I try to deliver what will be fruitful, what will be kind of educative to the audience
Definitely.
at all. Yeah.
Definitely. All right. Thank you for listening to today's episode, and we hope to see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the African Experience Podcast. For show notes, visit us on www.theaexppodcast.com and follow us on social media at the AEXP Podcast.